Hello everyone, it's Chris here. Welcome back and subscribe, do the usual things, spread the word, and if you feel like reading the books, and it seems quite a few of you are, thank you for that. Then please get hold of them by worth reading. And today I want to speak about Codename Phantom. Now, Codename Phantom is a very fascinating book because it contains certain warnings which has to do with unexploded ordnance in South Africa, which is waiting to explode, but I'll get to that. Let's first start with a name, codename Phantom. You know, it refers back to my late wife, Melissa. As I always say to you, this was before I met Rebecca, of course. And while I was writing the books, one a month, every 2-3 weeks, I would publish a new 400-500 page book for 44 months in a row, because I was just like, in a place where I didn't really wanted to face life. I was just, where all your dreams are crushed and the love of your life is dead. And very hard times, actually, very, very hard times. So I started writing the books, and I decided I'll go and warn people about what's going on in the world, or what I've seen, or what I believe is happening, and I'll put it in a story so that people can remember. Because if you see a PowerPoint presentation, you normally forget it before even the tea break starts, because it's boring in the extreme sense of the word, unless you have a very certain type of brain, and not many people do. But for normal people like us, it's a matter of hearing a story and you remember. I mean, you can tell me what your dad told you 50, 60 years ago in the form of a story, or you can tell me what your corporal or lieutenant did in the form of a story. No problem, you remember that. It's just human nature to do it. So that's what the books are about. The GMJ books, my own too, the ones under my own names, they're all written to educate. They're not really anything else than that. But there is, of course, a good story in the background, and there's, of course, a blooming romance between the two characters, Jeffrey Foxtrot and the spy master Angelique Dawson. And these people are based upon real people, of course. Every single character in the books are based upon real people. It's disguised, of course. It's disguised. In that world, you have to make sure that those in the know will definitely know. They will definitely be able to say, oh, yeah, we know who you're talking about. But those not in the know will definitely not know. And that's the way it should be. I'm sure you understand. Anyway, Codename Phantom, the name comes from the Phantom of the Opera. It's one of those operas which Melissa and myself actually saw. We went there. In fact, the cover picture on Codename Melise comes from that day, that night. That's a picture we took to put on the cover. It's not my favorite picture, to be honest. There's another one which I like more, so I might change the cover in the future or not. For many years, I tried to not show any pictures of her because of respect of her family, and of course, she held very high security clearances which the American government can bestow on you, which she lost the moment she got involved with me. With my background, he just could never. I fully understand that decision, but it did cause a lot of hardship and anguish as well. As they say, love is blind and it's stupid. But I will not trade those 8 days in my life ever again for anything else. In fact, there's no day in my life I want over again. Not a single one. For me, it is now, and it's especially the future when the second coming of Jesus arrives and our new life starts. Luckily, that's not far away. But if I had to have some days over, I would have liked to have those 8 days which we had together over. That's why most of the GMJ books, including this one, has eight chapters. The 8 chapters refers to the 8 days we were actually together in 2 years that you know we were one. So anyway, to make a long story short, Codename Phantom is about Zimbabwean opposition. What they basically do is they contact um, Angelique Dawson, who is the spy master, and they ask her for assistance. They need weapons. They need explosives, everything you can think of to start a revolution. And the problem is, of course, is how do you do that? And secondly, should you do that? Because it's actually a political decision. It's not really for the spy master, no matter how senior, to make that kind of decisions. This should come directly from the president. They call it a DP, direction president. So Angelique doesn't have that permission at all. So, but she just goes ahead and do it. Probably because there's a Eustace like with a baboon, Robert Mugabe, as I call him. I see nothing good of a fellow, in fact, and I trace it back to his Jesuit schools. Yes, if you look at his background, you'll see he went to missionary schools as a child, and that's where they got hold of him, and that's where the Jesuit influence came. Yeah, interesting, isn't it? All roads leads to Rome. Always, always. And he's also the only man which we know about where this late Pope Francis, the village idiot, where we bowed down first towards Mugabe. And he did that, they say, because Mugabe was a Jesuit before this Pope Francis was. But still, Mugabe was standing there in his black suit, you know, the color of slavery. And interesting when you see all these pictures and you understand what's going on. You will know who's the main man there. And it ain't the president or the Queen of England or whoever. No. They all bow down. You have to wonder why. Well, why do they do that? What's so special about this Pope? Or any Pope for that matter. What's so special about him? Well, they say he's a vicar of Christ. He is actually Christ on earth. It's so blasphemous, you know, but this traces back to the Bible. And I see within 8 minutes now I've mentioned oath of evil again. If a lot of you will find that actually, I would say by this time endearing. Some of you find it annoying. I don't care. You know what? When we speak about these things, there is only one book to read, and that's Oath of Evil, the Warn Protestantism, which will explain to you what's happening in the world and the things you might not understand, what's going on, practical, what's happening with South Africa and Trump. By the time you see this video, it's a few months later. But while I made it, it was just yesterday or the day before where he got ambushed like Zelensky did there in the White House. And instead of telling Trump to bugger off and to explain the life to him, he just bowed down. Of course he did. And there's also no doubt that Trump, they do have a point here with white farmers being attacked. There's no doubt about it. But to be honest, I couldn't find any evidence that it's actually a genocide. And I couldn't find any evidence that it's terrorism. Why? Because it doesn't look like terrorism. Yes, the acts which has been caused is violent, barbaric, criminal acts. Don't misunderstand me. I condemn it. But it does not follow the same way that it happened in Rhodesia. It doesn't follow the same way as in Novemberland. And most of the attackers are known to the farmer. So I doubt very much about this genocide claim. And since I know many other people like me also know it in the intelligence community and other places, and also the police, I spoke to the detectives, I spoke to the intelligence people, they all say it's definitely not terrorism, it's crime. Of course, you can say to me, every terrorist act is, of course, a crime. Yes, of course, I know, but we're talking terrorism here. So what's really happening there? Well, next time you sue Israel, and you win this case in the ICC, which is a useless court anyway, it's totally politicized. Just remember next time you do that, the Jewish state will lobby, they have a big brother, and that big brother is going to come for you. And that's exactly what's happened. But my advice is always, as I say it in many videos, if you can get out by using Trump's scam or scheme or whatever is offered for you to leave, then please do so. Leave. I would not recommend you to stay there. I don't see any good in the future where it's a BRICS country, and it's definitely going to follow the path of BRICS. Unless a white minority can somehow take over, which is impossible, it's never going to happen. They're already sold out. Just sitting there, not defending the real truth, just sitting there. Yeah, never had much respect for the DA to begin with. I have zero now. But anyway, the Zimbabwean opposition, there was a bit of a talk between Mr. Mandela and this Jesuit Mugabe, which Mugabe was making a few statements because he was jealous, because up to then he was the man everybody listened to in Southern Africa, and suddenly Mr. Mandela arrives as 10 times the man which he ever was. There was, of course, also, and we discussed it in many books, that real genocide which took place there when the Matabeles got murdered, I think by the Shonas, in other words, by Mugabe's people. But even with Mugabe, we're not even sure that both his parents were Rhodesians or Zimbabweans. But that doesn't matter. It's in all the books. Interesting how that is just never spoken about, Interesting, but we do write about it because it's very important that the stories come out. It's the same as we do on Legacy Conversations, where we get you to speak and you tell your military life story to us, and sometimes your civilian life afterwards, shortly, and how it affected you, blah, blah, blah. And then people, of course, can look at it and they can learn from you. And that, I think, is a great thing when you're above 50 years of age. And many of us are now approaching 60, 70, and even higher. You have wisdom, man. There's a lot of wisdom in you. You've seen life. And as I always say, we were wimps now. We're the uncles. We're the ones who have a grey hair and the stomach, the bookends. So, perhaps it's time for us to depart or impart our knowledge, to start talking so that people can understand. That's basically what the books are about. So anyway, in the book, they don't really explain why she's doing it. She just decided she's going to support the opposition. Did that happen? Yeah, absolutely. It did happen. The problem was how to get hold of the weapons, because this is not a state-run operation in the sense that Pretoria said, okay, Angelique, go and do this. No, she's doing this on the site or on herself. Again, why? If you look at the background as a penetration agent for France, for the West, then you will realize the sympathies are not really with BRICS, as most of the people, except the assassin teams. If you want to know what I'm talking about when I talk about these units, the assassins, the egg breakers, you have to actually read Codename Crocodile, which I will make a video soon. There I go into how these people were recruited, where they come from, what the units basically are. The egg breakers were definitely mentioned on Legacy by a certain officer of Special Forces, Project Ivory. I believe they became known later as egg breakers informally. The assassins were something else, but you can read Codename Crocodile and how they developed. And also in that book, Crocodile, we really go into the use of explosives in the shadows, because it's not like you can always have military explosives close by and it's a matter of arming it and placing it and it's there, or place first and then arm. You know what I mean? No, in the shadows it's different, and we look at the different methods and things. But like all the books, if you're a terrorist and you read them, you're not going to be able to make a bomb from that. And incidents are usually, all of them are already used in the past. So there's nothing new. But it is very, very fascinating, that book as well. Anyway, the problem we have in South Africa is twofold. If you live close to the R, for you who don't know it, it's a small town there in the middle of nowhere, but there's a lot of railway lines getting together, and it's quite far from the ocean. I think it's about, 300 miles, 500 kilos, I suppose, even more. And the reason for that is why they made a ammunition dump there is because of that, because it's close to the railway lines, but it's also far away from civilization almost. Now, Now we have to say that the place isn't totally uncivilized. I mean, that woman who wrote that story of an African farm. Let me just see what's her name. I made some notes here, you know. I'm actually getting good at that. Let me just see. Yeah, Olive Schreiner. She wrote the story of an African farm in 1883. She then died in 1920. Most of her life, she actually lived outside South Africa, so I don't know. But anyway, I even doubt if she can claim to be a South African. But that's a very, very famous story, still book, and people really loved it, and they love to read it. She's from that area nearby. There's a museum for her actually in Cradock, which is close by. But anyway, the Arie, the name itself means there's like a stream of water, like an artery, if you translate that directly from the Dutch or from Afrikaans. But there you will find a ammunition dump. And it's big. It's got 186 separate bunkers. And it's spread out. You can see it. It is covered with earth. There's lightning rods. There's all sorts of things there to protect it. But the damn problem is, and this is 2010 statistics, guys, it's worse now. Much worse. And since then, they don't really release statistics because of that. But there's 23,000 tons of explosives there. That is like bombs and air and artillery and what have you, things that can explode, military type of ordnance. And guess what? They're way beyond the date of expiry and due for destruction. 67% of them in those years. You can make it 100% today. That's 67%, is about 15,410 tons of bombs are waiting there to explode. Now, to put that in perspective, that puts it in the range of a Hiroshima bomb, atomic bomb. Yeah. So there's an atomic bomb waiting there in the heart to go boom. And the problem is if the explosives get so old that they start to crystallize, and that liquid now coming out of them, the chemicals inside are degrading. It's a horrible thing to actually try and move them. I mean, it's too dangerous. You can't move them. In fact, I cannot see how we can move those ammunition out of there to take somewhere. It's just there in the Northern Cape where you can destroy them. You know, where you just put them in a ditch, I suppose, and put your plastic explosives over them, link them up. If you listen to SVF Forever, explosives expert of Juan Recchi, or read his book, or book which we wrote, he explains quite a bit of how you would use these explosives and how you would link them up and so forth. But anyway, that's how they do it. They now have to get hold of the old ordnance, and then they put them together in sizes of 1 ton each. Now think about it. There's 23,000 tons, right? Just at the R. We haven't even got to Jan Kempdorp, where it's even worse. So when you place them there, you put the charts on it, you just blow it. Boom. That's how it goes. But that wasn't the way it used to be. In the old days, up to 1995, what you did with these old bombs and things is you just dump them into the ocean, man. You put them on a ship and you sailed out and you just dump it. And that was the way it was done everywhere. If you look at the old videos of World War II, you will see many of these aircraft and bombs and everything just being thrown overboard or abandoned somewhere. But after 95, you know, when Mr. Mandela came into being, the wokeism arrived as well. Save planet. Yeah. Oh, climate warning. Oh, yeah. Yeah, you know, if you read Oath of Evil, you will see I spend quite a few pages on climate change, because climate change is, yeah. But if you read there, and I'll put the slide in for you here, you will see that none of their bloody predictions actually came out. Not one. Not one. I think I have about 50 predictions there, which I started making from the 1960s, and every single one of them did not come out. Not one. It's nonsense. Part of Hegelian dialectic, which is explained also in Oath of Evil and codename GSSP 40. So yeah. So to make a long story short, because of those things, they said, no, you can't do it like that anymore. Now you have to sort of chemically disassemble it. It's very expensive. It's very slow. And that's why you have this damn problem now. People were not thinking, it's like, oh, this sounds so good. Oh, we're going to save the planet. Yeah, yeah. It's a funny thing. I don't eat meat. I'm a vegan and I'm doing well now. I was a bit ill the last few months, but now I'm like perfect. And I lost a lot of weight, and I'll lose even more weight. But it's funny to me for the meat eaters is that even the cow dung is now seen as earth warming. Absolutely no evidence of it, but no. So I think you people are going to get used to eating plants soon. Oh man, it's a crazy world we live in. But anyway, that's how they were doing it. They were throwing it overboard basically, and that's how they got rid of the extra ammo, and now they can't, and now they have this problem. Also, we looked at what happened in 1975 in North Vietnam. That is when North Vietnam actually took Saigon, and you saw them all running away, where the CIA left all their documents. Yeah, all of it. That's what they do. When they run away from a country, they leave their files behind. And what then happens is, like happened in Vietnam, is you had camps of re-education, which went on for 20 years, and they say there's still camps of re-education around. So yeah, they ran away, but you will have seen that these aircraft and helicopters and things were landing on the aircraft carriers, waiting outside, and they had not enough space, so they would take their Dewey or whatever and just throw it overboard. Now, you can look at it very negatively, which I sometimes do. We're not used to waste in the South African military or police where I come from. We just, that idea of throwing a helicopter overboard, which is totally working to me, is like, man, I don't even know how to describe it. It just doesn't happen with us. But it shows you what a big country that once was, that they could actually afford to do these things and just write it off and let it go. It's amazing. It's amazing what they could do. But anyway, it also, of course, shows that people were fleeing, and that's bad. So anyway, the R is waiting to explode, and so is Jan Kempdorp. Now, the Jan Kempdorp is even worse, because at Jan Kempdorp is, I think, about 27,000 tons of ammunition. And again, this goes down to 2010 statistic. It's quite more now. All in total, anyway, there was 52,260 tons of these ordnance waiting to explode in South Africa. These are fact, guys. As I always say to you, when you read my books, any of my books, doesn't matter which one, you will find out that the characters might say something like this, and you're like, wow. You can take for granted it's true. When they start speaking like this, or they start speaking history or tactics or weapons or whatever, you can take for granted there's a lot of research, or I know about it personally for some reason, and therefore this is the facts and nothing but the facts, and so it is. And yes, there were questions asked in Parliament about it, or as I understand it was, but of course they got no answers. It's a usual ish, yeah, well, you know what, you will and ish until that flippin' thing start exploding. Then the only thing which can save you is if these bunkers, which come from the Second World War, is so is secure enough to contain that explosion to just one bunker. But you still cannot get away from the fact that you can't move those explosives anymore. And as I said, the problem is to do it on the new way, the the liberal way of not dumping it into the ocean, even if you could have, which you cannot now. It will take you 34 years. And in the meantime, new ordnance is coming in. Why? Because the Army and Air Force especially don't have enough money from the government to shoot these things out and to destroy it. Because in a normal army, they have exercises. You guys have, I'm sure, attended these exercises, and you shoot a hell of a lot of ammo and shells and bombs and whatever. I mean, it's Skyfox, man. You just drop it. But since we're not doing that, and the weapons just came in and in and in. Yeah, there, yeah, 2 and 2, it makes 4. Doesn't make 5, it makes 4. And so they couldn't see that. But anyway, so part of the book is that is also to look at what we call red cell operations. Now, red cell operations, this is actually what the book is about. Angelique, in the front of the book, a look of Angelique and the Jim Day stories, there's always two things. Yes, you'll have in the front, you'll see Angelique is now wanting to assist these people, blah, blah, blah. And then now she wants to conduct red cell operations to test the base defenses. In other words, to see if a sabotage team can get into these ammunition dumps. Yeah, I'm just listening to the monsoon raining outside. If it rains harder than that, I have to go and close all the windows because, well, it's amazing when it rains on the monsoon here. But anyway, to make a long story short, that's how you test a base defense. In other words, you get special forces and sometimes your spies, your intelligence operators, and they would actually become terrorists, if you know what I mean. And they would then go and test the defenses. Those things are called red cell operations, and that's what she's doing in the front of his book, the front part. She's wanting to have her teams conduct red cell operations, but in the background, she wants to actually steal those weapons which can still be used and ordnance and smuggle them to Zimbabwe. And of course, to do that, you have to write another book, which is called Mel's Choice, which is how she actually does it. And then in Mel's Choice, and we'll talk about Mel's Choice too, she actually gets shot down. Well, when I say that, I can actually see the real one's face flashing here in front of me, frowning. And then I stopped talking right there because he was not shot down. It was just, the aircraft was just so damaged that you had to do an emergency landing where the flipping aircraft broke into 2 pieces. But anyway, wasn't shot down, not at all. No, of course not. No, just a rumor. But anyway, then she wanted revenge, and that comes in Codename Monica, where she used a G6 battery as well as a Valkyrie to ambush a whole bunch of infantry. But anyway, so those books follow each other. But as I say to you guys, every book is on its own, so you can read it. But anyway, so the first red cell operations in the 1980s, which became really famous, was conducted by Navy SEALs. I think it was SEAL Team 6. There was a Commander Richard Marcinko. And I think Commander Marcinko is still alive. If not, rest in peace. A very good operator, really great guy. In those days, I think US Special Forces were still counted. They were not as low standards as they become today. And so he selected a team and he was offered the opportunity to test the US military bases across the world. And so he formed a red team, and that became unofficially known as the Red Cell. Now, you can see the borderline of Red Cell type of influence in a way of speaking coming from the 70s, but this was mid-80s. So anyway, they were damn good at this. They were actually too good. They were so good that they caused a lot of problems. And and he couldn't be protected because he was humiliating commanders, senior commanders, now base commanders who were heading for flag rank already, and they now want to go even further. Because, if you attain flag rank in the US military, and there's about, 400 or 500 of them, no, more than 1,000. It's amazing. It's amazing. People laugh about the South African military where there were many generals. Just remember the brigadiers were never generals, and suddenly they became generals again. That made one hell of a difference. But before that, they used to be generals. It goes back to in the 1920s when the British Army had the same problem. Oh, they had too many generals, just after the First World War. And so they said, okay, a brigadier from now on is not a general anymore, it's just a brigadier. And so they sort of demoted the guys away. Meaning that the guys who were still brigadier generals stayed brigadier generals, but the new ones became brigadiers. And the same went, of course, to the South African Army. And then lately, the brigadiers then became generals again. But anyway, they've got way too many generals. And if you know the system, it's an open door revolving. In other words, they just go and join the military industrial complex, and they suddenly go up from no money at all. Yeah, meaning they would have, worked hard for 30, 40 years in the army or wherever. But they suddenly go to multimillionaire status just like that. And that is why you see the US military is in a mess. They don't have a weapons. Doesn't matter what Trump tells you. We know the truth. It's all bullshit. They don't have it. Nothing. Gonna lose the next war. But anyway, so Commander Masinko was protected by a Vice Admiral James Ace Lyons Jr., who was then a Deputy Chief of Naval Operations. And the moment this guy left, Masinko became, open target. Everybody came for him. And I think they got him too. I think he ended up in jail or something, but I speak on the correction. They just hammered him until he left the Navy. They started saying that his team became totally wayward, and they wouldn't follow instructions, and they had long hair, and they became like liberals and all sorts of things. Now, they were taking revenge, but also in the background, Masinko himself then said, yeah, that's true. They were doing the Red Cell operations, but that was a cover for actual other work. And he never really explained what the other work was. But we can make an educated guess. We can make a guess. Now, I myself actually saw one of these when I was a child. I was at a place called Giani, which I don't even know where it is. But that's where I actually started going to school, I think in 1973. Perhaps 74, I can't remember exactly. Must be 73 because I left school in 85, 12 years. I never failed. I'll say 12 years. 12 years too long, man. But anyway, so 73, Giani, and then the army came and they had this massive exercise. They arrived there with the elands, with Noddy cars, and they were there, and they had the blue, the blue band soldiers, and they had the red band soldiers, and I had a flight in Alouette with my dad. He was like a magistrate or something there, so. And I remember all those things. And then they started building bridges, these Bailey bridges, things like that. Fascinating. We discussed the Bailey bridges as well in some of the GMJ books. I think the first one's written, I think, probably in VFO 565, we talk about the history of that. But anyway, I noted the police worms were not impressed. They were standing there shaking their heads and muttering to themselves. So I walked closer to listen to what they have to say. And they were basically saying the army is playing games and they should wake up. They used language which I assure you my dad would not have tolerated in our house. And I couldn't quite understand why the policemen were saying that. And then later years I realized they came back from Rhodesia. They were used to counterinsurgency, and they looked at this display of conventional might as nonsense. Of course, after that came Savannah, right? So it wasn't nonsense. But the real thing which happened one night, we woke up and it is just explosives, man. It was just boom, boom. And I actually dived under my bed, and there I stayed with my pellet gun. And the next morning I found out, no, what happened here was the army officers were now using very foul language, very, very foul. And they started talking about the F operators. And yeah, of course, the Special Forces, I think, originally started in 1972 or somewhere. Or perhaps it was a hunter group, I don't know. But they were talking about the F-reckies and things like that. And basically there was a Red Cell operation which was happening there. They penetrated these bases and they put thunder flashes and things on it. They blew up now in italic. Every single helicopter, every single whatever, they just blew them all up. Yeah, and I've been trying on Legacy to get hold of the guys who did it. And then I learned a very valuable lesson because by that time, of course, I knew about, Special Operations Executive and the other sabotage groups because I read from the age of 4. And I think by the time I was 5 years old, I read the first 100-page book. I will never forget it. I finished reading the book and I was so happy. And I walked to my mom and I showed her I read the 100-page book and she was so happy. Up to then, she would read to me, or perhaps my elder siblings, but they soon got tired of me. So my mom said to me, look, you just need to learn to do it yourself. Let me sit here on my lap. I will help you. And it became magic. And the words just, man, you know, when you read a good book and you see this playing off in front of you like a movie. Well, they say there are two types of people in the world, right? There's those people who love reading and there are those who don't. But anyway, that's what the book is about. It is actually in the background. It describes the red cell operations, but also in the background, it warns you about atomic bombs waiting to explode. And it's not real atomic bombs now, before somebody misquote me again. But for the same power as atomic bombs, you can go and work out. It's about, if you say Hiroshima bombs was about between 15 and 18,000 tons of bombs each, and you talk about three of them waiting in South Africa to go boom. And once it goes boom, it's going to go boom. I don't know what's the answer. I really don't have answers for you. I don't know what to do with those explosives. I spoke to the explosives experts and they just look at me like this and they say, well, of course, you know, there's a three-letter word, man. There's actually two three-letter words you can use here. Yeah, I wouldn't say the first, but it starts with an F. They had their maths wrong. It's actually 4 letters. No, F-U-C-K. Yeah, with a huge exclamation mark. And then the second one, which they had, and there they got it right. It says, you're wrong. So they just say you're F wrong. Wrong. There's nothing you can do, guys. We can't. I don't even know. You can't even send a robot in to move out those explosives. They're going to go boom. Anyway, we look at Jan Kempthorp, you know, where those second dumpies we there as well in the book now. We look at it. I remember driving past it many, many times because my grandmom, my mom's mother, was actually in Ganspan, which is very close by. Of course, my father comes from the Northern Cape as well, a place called Kotzershoop. I believe where the family farm was very close by. Don't know if Kotzershoop is named after us. No idea. We've never been there. I doubt it. But anyway, so we would often go and visit Granny, and we would drive past these guys, and they would sit in their towers waving at us, blah, blah, blah. I never realized that one day I would write a book on what's actually going on inside. Also, in those days, there were a lot of rumors that there were big bunkers there were full of World War II stuff, you know, like Willis Jeeps and all these type of things. Well, I spoke to the people who worked there, and they say, no, that's only a rumor. Of course, we know there was a shaft not far away from there in that part of the world anyway, where the first nuclear bomb was supposed to be exploded. And then it was discovered, and they abandoned those plans to explode the nuclear bombs there. I think we discussed that too in this book, but if you want to know about the South African nuclear program, you actually have to read Codename Angel, because that's where we go into it very deeply. And once again, Zimbabwe plays a role there because they try to smuggle. Anyway, doesn't matter. You guys, I'll get to the video for that. Just be patient, you know, because we're talking 67 books. So even if I make a video every day, it's going to take me about 67 days. Let's say 3 months to make the videos, and then to put them out every week is going to take more than a year. So that's just how it is. But anyway, that's Codename Phantom. I don't have a copy of it yet, but I can show you a copy of Codename Malice, which I also need to talk about in the future. Malice is actually the longest book in the series. Besides, I think Oath of Evil might be longer. I've reduced it a bit now to 500 and something pages, but at one stage it was quite a bit longer. This is Melissa here when we were at Phantom of the Opera. Yeah, she ate the ostrich burger that night. That's what she ate. But anyway, to make a long story short, when we were inside the theater, she started singing with. It's not that she's a bad singer. She sang actually very well, but you guys who've actually went to operas, you will know that it's a bit of a snobby crowd there, you know. bit Swiss, they look down on you. And so I had to nudge her Mister, stop singing with me because people was giving me old evil eye. It's just, of course, this is a Freemason sign. It's a complete a signal that occult sign that actually doesn't matter what you're saying, you're actually on the side of who you're attacking. Go and look at the US Congress and everywhere often you see people like this, like some guy, I think congressman from California, always talking shite. It's amazing. Always standing like this when he's giving a speech, as if he cannot afford bifocals. Yeah, one of those got very rich since he joined Parliament. Like that, what Nancy Pelosi, who suddenly had 155 million US. Wow, how wonderful is that? Huh? What a corrupt system. Yeah, they truly became the second beast. They were absolutely the same as what Rome used to be. Anyway, I don't want to go into that now. That is Codename Phantom. The book's about 350 pages, and it's fairly short. It's a really nice book to read. Lots of funny incidents happens there, and a lot of serious things as well. So that's a book. It's available in hardcover, softcover, audio, Kindle, all on Amazon. I'll leave the links for you. If you want to know about red cell operations, how it's conducted, because it actually goes back to VF 0565. Actually, no, Poire Angelique, the second book, codenamed Poire Angelique, which I did discuss when I spoke about Eggbreaker War, which is a series in a series. The other day, I had a fellow here sitting in Phuket because he came to visit. A really great guy, and he sat there, and he was also on Legacy. And he sat there and he said, Chris, I really enjoyed that book, and I read it, and I couldn't stop reading it. And it reminded me, I wrote another book where one of the readers wrote to me, and he said to me, it was so good actually that even if a wife came to do what we do on a Sunday afternoon, I would have told her to wait. I need to finish the book. It was codenamed Lucy, which is, of course, I spoke about before. And Lucy is a really fascinating book. But in Poire Angelique, basically, what they want to do is they want to sabotage the South African submarine fleet, squadron, or what do you call it, escadron, or whatever you call it, where it is based in Simonstown. And so they did it, in the book now. And I said in the book that this is actually based upon, prior red cell operations. I don't think I used the word red cell, but it came down to prior testing of the base defenses. So yeah, that is exactly where that comes from, and that is how, well, when I wrote the book, I could tell you exactly how the infiltration points were, how to penetrate the base, where everything is, and what to do. Which is not the same thing as to say I want somebody to go and blow up the submarines. In fact, I don't. And if I find out about somebody planning to do that, I will report it. But it is like all the GMJ books, they are warnings. It means that base is open, you can do it, but so is every single base. But South Africa is not on a war footing. You also have to remember that. It's not on a war footing. It's not like in the old days where you were expecting terrorists to come and attack you. So yes, it is a little bit lax. But having said that, I went to Tempe when I was in South Africa to record, and I made a lot of videos there, especially at the School of Armor. And while I was recording there, actually one of the staff sergeants came to me and said, "Sir," very polite, but a nice guy. And he said to me, "Sir, do you have permission to record here?" And I said, "Look, I don't need permission. I'm not recording inside. If you read your own website," and I showed him the website on my phone, and also Legacy, and that what we're doing, Renew Legacy. I think he knew me as well. And I was very impressed with him because he actually walked up and he said, "Hey, what are you doing?" But, we don't do things illegally. We never do that. And then we left and we drove out, and we also recorded, I think, the Museum of, what's that unit where it's here for recoms on SSB, SSB. We recorded that. a special service battalion. The museum, but they were still building it and renovating, so I didn't want to bring a video out on it. I think it would do it an injustice, even though I have the videos. So I didn't broadcast it at all. No intention to do so. But you know what? It was funny as you enter even the Armor School of Armor Museum, or you enter in SSB, the gate guards are standing there. They're likely looking lads, you know. They're very fit people, and they have their R4s. Okay, not pointing at you, but they're ready. And they're standing there, and they closely observe you. And one would actually approach, "Morning, sir. How are you? Yes. Can I help you? What are you doing here?" You know, it was, guys. You know what? Don't believe the shit you see on TikTok. You know, every now and then somebody sends me this TikTok video. Oh, here's a guard lying asleep, as if you never slept in your life on guard duty or whatever. You know, it's just crazy. Or every now and then there's like a picture. Oh yes, a Olifant tank. It's lying on its side. Now, I remember when I went first to School of Armor, the commanding officer, the wonderful major, he said to me, "Hey, look at this file. He's got a file this big, man. It's like 3 or 4 Bibles." I say, "What's that?" He said, "No, this is all the incidents we had during the apartheid years, where people flipped a tank or flipped a rattle or flipped a buffalo or whatever." So, you know, we like to point fingers, but we're wrong. And then when we left Tempe, we actually got to the main entrance, and there stands the parachute battalion. They got the guard duty there at the main gate. Whoa, man! They the last people I would like to take on. If you ever seen parade in your life, I've seen it there. Parade, absolutely parade. They were standing there, 2 guys covering you. Again, not pointing firearm at you, but you can see they know how to deal with that firearm. They got the magazine on, they got their chest webbing, they got their parachute red beret, like only they can wear it. Proud, wings, standing there, and one would approach and they fit people. Oh my word, they fit. And they would approach, "Sir, how are you?" "Yes, no, we're good. Thank you. Thank you. Sir, can you please open the boot? We need to check it." "Yeah, of course. Let's go and open." Absolute professionalism. So don't come to me with shite from TikTok. I'm not interested in your crap. Don't send it to me, please. I actually lost friends because of it, because one day I was quite ill, didn't feel well. And the guy sent it to me, and I just exploded and just left a message, which I apologize for later, but I think he's still angry, you know. So, guys, there's always 2 sides to a story, isn't there? Always 2 sides to a story. Anyway, but that is Codename Phantom. It's a really, as I say again, it's a great book. Try and get hold of it. But be warned, if you get hold of it, you're going to want to read Mel's Choice, and then you're going to want to read Anita. Codename Annika. Perhaps I should write the codename Anita at some stage. She also got a very interesting post, our presenter at Legacy. She's here, by the way. She's in Phuket, or she used to be. Came here for 6 weeks to look after me, but by the time you see her, she's long back home again. So anyway, we'll talk again, and God bless, and thanks for listening.